Once again, it will be useful to pull back and survey what was going on in Europe, in this case during Beethoven's first decade in Vienna. Looking at the dates, you might recall that when Beethoven was just a young boy in Bonn, a funny thing happened on the other side of the Atlantic. Some men got together and said, and I quote, "We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed," and so on. These are Enlightenment ideals applied in political philosophy. We hold these truths to be self-evident. The authors of the Declaration do not seek authority in the Bible or Aristotle or any received text. They're presenting a logical argument. They're appealing to your common sense and reason. All men are created equal. No one is naturally, automatically deserving to belong to a higher, wealthier social class. This idea that we all have certain natural rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, and that the point of government is to secure those rights for all of us, not for whoever's in charge to amass greater wealth or control more real estate. So as commonplace as it seems to us now, these were radical ideas back then. Here in America, we had to fight a war to win our independence from the British Crown, and the aftermath was comparatively orderly. But in the few years before Beethoven went to Vienna, something comparable happened in France, but with much, much, much more important and chaotic results right there in the heart of Europe, and which ultimately spread across Europe. So, putting aside those lofty Enlightenment ideals, if you are a European monarch, then you're very much interested in amassing more wealth and controlling more real estate. And in the decades leading up to the revolution, the French government had incurred tremendous debt by financing two wars in North America. The first, from 1754 to 1763, what we in America call the French and Indian War, because that's who our forebears, as loyal British colonists, were fighting against, was really just one theater of a whole series of wars taking place not only in North America, but in Europe, with the great European powers slugging it out. The House of Hanover in Britain against the Bourbon dynasty in France and Spain, and the Hohenzollerns in Prussia, duking it out with the Habsburgs in Austria. And then there's that little business of the American Revolution, because, again, this was a chance for France to stick it to Britain. So our revolution was largely financed by France, with the unbelievable profits that were rolling in from their sugar plantations in the West Indies at a tremendous human cost in African slaves. So the French government had racked up huge debts and was trying to figure out a way to pay them off. The wealthiest classes in France were exempt from taxes, and the peasants and everyone else were already taxed heavily. There were food shortages, and this ultimately led to a popular uprising in 1789, including dramatic events such as the taking of the notorious Bastille prison. And for the next few years, there are several experiments with new forms of government for this country, which for centuries had been a monarchy. There was an attempt at constitutional monarchy in 1790, but that fell apart. And the next thing you know, in 1792, the royal family tries to flee Paris, disguised as servants. But they are recognized and captured by revolutionaries, and in 1793, King Louis XVI is executed, and later that year, his queen, Marie Antoinette, also executed. Meanwhile, the taking of the royal family had triggered other European powers to take action to invade France and try to restore the monarchy, partly as a matter of monarchic principle, partly trying to protect their own. Queen Marie Antoinette wasn't French by birth, but rather Austrian. She was a Habsburg. These invading armies touch off a whole series of what are known as the French Revolutionary Wars, These revolutionary wars lasted through most of the 1790s and even into the 1800s. So this has a very real and immediate impact on anyone in the Rhine Valley, and as we'll see, yes, even in Vienna. Meanwhile, back in France, all those wonderful Enlightenment principles are being put to the test as the attempt at democracy slides into mob rule and the terror from 1793 to 1794, in which at least 16,000 and possibly as many as 40,000 people are killed for political reasons, as power shifts back and forth among various factions. This is one reason you'll see the persistence of the idea of the bon prince, the enlightened despot who can implement Enlightenment ideals, because the situation in France showed that it could be a very dangerous thing for power to accrue to people who were ruled more by their emotions than by reason. The armies of the young French Republic fared remarkably well, in part because of smart and inventive officers. The one best known to us today is a young Corsican-born artillery officer named Napoleon Bonaparte, who was not only capable in the field, but also politically ambitious. Specifically, in 1799, he was part of a coup d'etat that took over the government and, following an ancient Roman model, assumed the title of consul, along with two other consuls. And before long, he was named first consul, and not long after that, well, we'll look into that in the next unit. So, for now, the key points are that France was thrown into turmoil, and other European powers were drawn in, and the French army not only pushed them back, but actually expanded French territory right up to the Rhine, installed a client state in the Netherlands, took portions of the Italian peninsula. In short, the French Revolution was not simply a local phenomenon. It exerted a tremendous impact on the rest of Europe for years, even decades afterward.